All right, today we're going to be replacing this CV axle on this Honda Odyssey. So we got the wheel off already. First step here is going to be loosening up this axle nut. This particular axle nut has a crimp on the end, so we need to make sure and relieve that crimp before we zip it loose with an impact gun. So you can use a chisel or a punch. We get that backed up. Get that nut off there. Make sure this guy's freed up. So now we need to relieve some tension on this steering knuckle so we can maneuver this out of here. So to do it on this particular car, what we're going to do is we're going to take these two clevis bolts loose from the strut to the knuckle. So depending on the car, there's more than one way to do it. But on this particular one, that's how we're going to do it on this car. So we're going to start taking off some of these lines and fittings to get us a little bit of wiggle room. So we got our wheel speed sensor. We're going to unclip it just to make sure that we don't damage it. Then we have this hold down stay for the brake hose. We're going to zip out that socket. You can give us a little bit of slack there. If you're worried about it, you can always take the caliper off and hang it up. I don't think it's going to be in the way on this one, so we'll see here. Now we'll get this wheel knuckle relaxed back. I'm going to push this axle out. Use a pry bar if needed. You want to make sure that we don't damage this brake hose in the process. So looks a little tight, so we'll probably go ahead and pull this brake caliper off just to be safe. Get that hung out of the way. I'm going to take off these clips on the brake pads so we don't lose those. So, now we should be able to get enough room to get this axle out of here. Now with that out of the way, on this particular axle, it has a intermediate support bearing, so we have to loosen the bolts that are holding it on. So we're going to raise up the lift a little bit. Then we're going to get a drain pan underneath the transmission in case we lose a little fluid. We're going to zip out these two 14-millimeter bolts. Get those out. We're going to pry the support out. this guy out all the way. There you have it. So we'll get the new one, start going back together. All right, we're gonna go back together. Our new axle shaft. You want to make sure on this end that goes into the transmission, you want to be careful that we don't hit the seal and damage the seal. And same way with these CV boots. You know, make sure not to bump them into anything and cut those. So we're going to carefully line it up. Line up this bearing support, kind of support the weight of the axle. So we slide it in. So we have that bearing support. We're going to put our 2 bolts in. Now we'll get our axle started in the knuckle. Get that all lined up. Put our strut bolts back in. Tighten these down. Now we're going to put this wheel speed sensor wire back into place. Its little hold downs. We can put our springs back on our brake pads. Hopefully they'll stay in place. Put our brakes back together. Run those down. We'll torque them here in a minute. Put this bolt in for the brake hose. Bracket. Get that in there. And then all that's really left is our axle nut. And since this was staked, you want to always replace this with a new one. A lot of manufacturers, these are one-time use for that reason. So we have a new one here. We're going to run it down and then torque it with a torque wrench and then stake our nut. So we will torque this and then I'll show you how to stake that. All right, so we have to torque our axle nut here. On this particular car, it torques at 242 foot-pounds, so that's pretty tight. The trouble with that is when you're turning the nut, the wheel and hub is going to want to turn like this. So there's a few ways you could do it. You could put the wheel back on without the center cap on the wheel and put your socket and extension through there. You could also have a helper hold down the brake pedals where the brake pads would actually hold the rotor. And a third way is you could block the rotor from turning like this with a punch. So use caution with this one. So you want to make sure that you're not going to tear up the rotor or anything like that. So we got our torque wrench set, slow and steady pressure until it clicks. So we got that guy torqued. So now all we need to do is stake our nut to make sure it doesn't back off. So get you a punch and a hammer. All we got to do is put a little dimple that matches with that notch in the axle shaft. So just like that, that's going to keep that guy from backing off. And there we have it. So we got our new axle shaft in there, and that should take care of our clicking noise while turning. So easy as that, guys.